Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Diddy in the same private room, behind closed doors, in the deepest hours of the night. And now Rihanna is finally the one holding the match. Something has been buried in that story for 2 full decades, and the internet just yanked the lid off the coffin. I want to know why no one in this entire industry has ever sat down and told the truth about what Diddy and Beyonce really were to each other. Because the version we've been fed for 20 years is starting to look like a full-on cover-up. Buckle in, because what you're about to hear rewrites the whole story. And by the time we hit the end of this breakdown, you're going to understand exactly why Beyonce's team has spent millions of dollars burying every single receipt attached to this name. Rihanna didn't just crack the door open this week. Rihanna kicked the door clean off the hinges, walked into the room with the lights on, and dragged Beyonce, Jay-Z, and Diddy out into the daylight all at once. And the internet has not stopped shaking since. Let me set the table for you, because if you don't know the full history, you cannot possibly understand how devastating what Rihanna just said really is. Unless you've been sleepwalking through the last 12 months, you already know that Diddy is currently the most disgraced man in the history of black entertainment. His empire has been ripped apart brick by brick. His freak-off parties have become the single most searched phrase in celebrity court documents, and every A-lister who ever set foot inside one of his mansions has been sweating bullets ever since the Fed started digging. But here is the part almost nobody has been willing to say out loud until this week. The 2 names that keep floating to the surface every single time somebody insiders opens their mouth are not obscure names. They are not background players. They are Sean Carter and Beyonce Knowles Carter. And now Rihanna herself, the same Rihanna who was allegedly signed by Jay-Z at 3 in the morning when she was 14 years old, has stepped into the arena and started swinging. Rihanna is not commenting anymore. Rihanna is accusing. Rihanna is naming. And the specific claim that Rihanna has now put into the atmosphere is that Beyonce did not just allegedly attend Diddy's freak-off parties as some kind of curious guest. Rihanna is suggesting that Beyonce allegedly filmed her own freak-off tape at one of those events, that the tape allegedly features a very young performer alongside her, and that the tape is currently being auctioned off in the darkest corners of the industry to the single highest bidder willing to make it disappear forever. And if that sentence didn't stop you cold, this one will. Rumors are now circulating in multiple corners of the industry that Beyonce allegedly contracted a life-altering illness at one of those parties, that the source of that alleged illness was Diddy himself, and that the entire Carter empire has been quietly working overtime to bury every trace of it before it detonates in public. Now, before anyone jumps in the comments claiming I'm making this up, let me hand the microphone to the people who have actually said these things on camera themselves. Because the truth is, the Diddy and Beyonce connection has been sitting there in plain sight for 2 full decades, and every single time somebody has tried to talk about it, they have either been paid off, muted, or run out of the industry entirely. Cast your mind back to the interview that broke the entire dam open. DaBaby sat down with Shannon Sharpe, and what DaBaby said in that conversation should have been the biggest story in music that entire week. DaBaby claimed he pulled up to Diddy's Los Angeles mansion in the opening months of 2020 for what he genuinely believed was a professional business meeting. And when DaBaby walked in, the room was already stacked with industry heavyweights. But 2 of the 15 people still standing in that room after Diddy cleared everyone else out were Jay-Z and Beyonce. Read that sentence back to yourself slowly. Diddy cleared his own house of every guest except roughly 15 people. And 2 of those 15 people, sitting inside the private inner circle of the most infamous freak-off host in modern American history, were the king and queen of hip-hop themselves. According to DaBaby, the vibe in the room shifted the moment the crowd thinned. Diddy allegedly placed his arm around DaBaby and made it very clear that DaBaby was one of the chosen ones staying inside. And then, DaBaby claims, Beyonce herself walked across that room and introduced herself to him like they had never crossed paths before, even though DaBaby was one of the biggest rap acts on the planet at that exact moment. DaBaby said Beyonce told him she was a big fan of his work. He said the whole exchange struck him as dope. He also said, in the same breath, that the situation put into perspective exactly what kind of company he was keeping that night. He didn't have to finish the sentence. Every viewer with a working set of ears knew exactly what he meant. But this is the moment the whole thing cracks open. Right around the exact same window when DaBaby's testimony was ricocheting through the internet, attorney Ariel Mitchell walked into the story and lit an entirely different fuse. Ariel Mitchell is an actual attorney. Ariel Mitchell is not a gossip blogger. Ariel Mitchell is not a random voice on the internet. She is a credentialed legal professional. And Ariel Mitchell went on camera and said, on the record, that she was contacted by someone who wanted her to broker the sale of a freak-off tape featuring Diddy and a second celebrity who is, in her exact words, more high-profile than Diddy himself. Let that land. more high-profile than Diddy. There is a very short list of names on this planet more high-profile than Sean Combs. Beyonce is on that short list. Jay-Z is on that short list. Ariel Mitchell did not just take the meeting. Ariel Mitchell did not just hear a rumor. Ariel Mitchell said she personally viewed stills from the tape. She said the second celebrity in the tape is clearly identifiable. She said there is no confusion whatsoever about who the second person is. And she said the entire scenario had all the markings of a classic catch-and-kill operation, where a celebrity is quietly informed that a tape exists and given the first chance to purchase it before it hits the public. Every time Ariel Mitchell spoke, she got just close enough to the flame to burn the entire industry down without ever naming the celebrity directly. And every viewer with a functioning memory instantly connected her testimony to DaBaby's testimony. Two separate credible sources, two separate accounts, one identical implication. Beyonce. Then Jaguar Wright entered the conversation, and Jaguar Wright doesn't do subtlety. Jaguar Wright doesn't hedge her words. Jaguar Wright doesn't leave space for interpretation. Jaguar Wright claimed the exact reason DaBaby never fully connected all the dots in his Shannon Sharpe interview was because Shannon Sharpe himself allegedly had business entanglements with Jay-Z and Beyonce that he was not willing to jeopardize. Jaguar Wright alleged that Shannon was chasing NFL-related opportunities that ran directly through the Carter family's business network, and that under absolutely no circumstance was Shannon going to let DaBaby name-drop Jay and Bey on his podcast and torch those deals in real time. This is not a rumor without receipts. This is not a whisper in a bathroom. This is a public accusation from a woman who has been correct about too many things in this industry too many times to be dismissed as noise. Jaguar Wright has been right when the mainstream media has been wrong for over a decade. And now Jaguar Wright is telling us that the Carter family has been actively suppressing testimony about Diddy since long before the feds ever knocked on his door. Now here is the piece almost nobody remembers. And honey, you need to remember this, because it is the foundation of everything that comes next. The Diddy and Beyonce history does not begin in 2020. It does not begin in 2015. It goes all the way back to the moment Destiny's Child was still shopping their demo tape around Manhattan, hunting for a record deal. Before Destiny's Child was Destiny's Child as the world knows them, they sat in front of Sean Combs himself, and they sat in front of Clive Davis, and both of those men, two of the most powerful executives in the entire American music industry, passed on the group. And the reason they passed is the darkest sentence in this entire timeline. Sources familiar with those meetings say Diddy and Clive Davis both felt the girls were not sexy enough to move records, not talented enough, not marketable enough, sexy enough. On 4 teenage black girls from Houston. Try to reconcile that if you can. But the story about Diddy and Beyonce's first encounter does not end at the pass. Chatter across the industry says Diddy was not actually rejecting the whole group in that meeting. Chatter across the industry says Diddy had already locked in on one specific member of the group and had already decided she was the one worth watching. That member was Beyonce. He praised her voice on the spot. He praised her name on the spot. He allegedly told the room that the name Beyonce itself was unique enough to build an entire brand around. And yet, even with all of that praise pouring out of him, Diddy still passed on the deal. Because in the words attributed to him in that room, the whole package didn't have enough sex appeal. On teenagers. On Beyonce. In 1996. The math on that sentence should make every parent watching this video sick to their stomach. And here's where it gets ugly, because the story goes that Diddy never actually let go of Beyonce after that meeting. People close to Diddy over the years have alleged that he kept a soft obsession running quietly in the background, that he found ways to keep Beyonce orbiting his world even after she signed elsewhere, and that his interest never fully cooled. Which brings us, and I promise you this connects, to the single most bizarre and humiliating story in the entire Diddy public record. The cheesecake story. Every single person who has followed the fall of Diddy has heard the cheesecake story. For years, the internet believed that the reason Diddy sent his band artists on a multi-mile walk across New York City in the middle of the night to fetch him a cheesecake was pure, straightforward humiliation. That Diddy was flexing his power. That Diddy was breaking down his artists. But the cheesecake was Diddy's own late-night snack. That version of the story is now officially dead. Because Freddie P., one of the actual members of the band who lived that entire night, has finally come forward and said the cheesecake was never actually for Diddy. The cheesecake, according to Freddie P., was for Beyonce. Beyonce was allegedly upstairs in that Manhattan hotel the entire time those men were being marched through the city like errand runners. Beyonce was allegedly the one Diddy was trying to impress. Beyonce was allegedly the reason those men were humiliated. Freddie P. said it plainly on camera. He said the whole exchange happened right in front of him. He said Diddy grabbed the cheesecake from his hands and said, "Take it upstairs for Beyonce." And the second that sentence hit the internet, an entire 20-year mythology collapsed in real time. The cheesecake was not a punishment. The cheesecake was a courtship gift. And Beyonce was in Diddy's hotel room while her future husband's competition was breaking their feet on New York pavement. Now let's move the timeline forward to the piece that made me sit up in my chair and completely change how I've thought about this couple for the last 15 years. Rihanna. Rihanna, who is the actual truth teller at the center of this entire storm. Rihanna, who was 14 years old when she was pulled into the orbit of Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Def Jam Records. Rewind to that moment when producer Evan Rogers discovered Rihanna in Barbados while he was on vacation. Rihanna was not some random teenager singing into her hairbrush. Rihanna had already formed a small vocal group with a couple of her classmates back on the island. Rihanna was already trying to build something. Evan Rogers recognized what he was looking at, cut some demo tapes with her, arranged her paperwork, and flew her into the United States to audition for major labels. One of the labels on that list was Def Jam, and the president of Def Jam at that exact moment, sitting behind that exact desk, was Sean Carter. Jay-Z heard the demos. Jay-Z was impressed. Jay-Z specifically flagged the song Pon to replay. Jay-Z called Rihanna into his New York office for a personal audition. And this is where the timeline drops off a cliff. According to Rihanna herself, told in her own words on camera, that audition did not happen at 10 in the morning. It did not happen in the afternoon. It did not happen during regular business hours. The audition happened at 3 o'clock in the morning. 3 in the morning. In a corporate office, where the vast majority of the staff had gone home hours earlier. For a 14-year-old girl from Barbados who had been flown across an entire ocean without her parents. If a stranger from your child's school scheduled a meeting with your teenage daughter at 3 a.m. in a mostly empty office building in a city she had never been in, you would burn that building down before you let her walk through the door. But Rihanna walked through the door. And the story of what happened inside that office should have ended music industry careers years ago. Rihanna performed. Rihanna performed while jet-lagged, while surrounded by grown men, while carrying the entire weight of her family's future in her lungs. And after she finished, Jay-Z allegedly told her she was not leaving that office without a signed contract. Rihanna has laughed about this story on camera. The interviewer laughed about it on camera. The audience laughed about it on camera. And I have never understood why. Because what Jay-Z actually said, according to Rihanna's own words, was that there were only two ways she was leaving that room that night. One was through the door with a signed record deal in her hand. The other, and I want you to hear this the way it was actually said, was through the office window. From the 29th floor. To a 14-year-old girl. In the middle of the night. Alone in the office of the biggest name in hip-hop. Try laughing at that sentence one more time. Rihanna signed the deal. Rihanna dropped Pon to replay in 2005. Rihanna became a global superstar within 18 months. And immediately, almost from the very first single, the whispers about what actually happened between Rihanna and Jay-Z started leaking. Rihanna's own publicist at the time made a public accusation that Jay-Z had allegedly pressured Rihanna into a personal relationship. The publicist later attempted to walk that accusation back and claimed the entire thing was a promotional stunt cooked up to boost Pon to replay's numbers. But nobody who was actually paying attention in 2005 believed that walk back for a single second, and even fewer people believe it in 2026. Because if you are the publicist for a teenage female artist, and you decide, out of every possible marketing angle available to you in the entire universe of promotional strategies, that the best possible pitch is to imply your 14-year-old client is having a coerced affair with her married boss, you are either the most incompetent public relations professional in the history of the industry, or you are telling a truth you are being forced to bury after the fact. And Beyonce, according to multiple sources, found out. Wendy Williams reported on air that Beyonce and Rihanna had a serious falling out during that exact period. Wendy claimed the alleged relationship between Jay-Z and Rihanna went far deeper than a passing infatuation. Wendy alleged that Rihanna developed genuine feelings for Jay-Z. And once you sit with that for a minute, an enormous, unanswerable question crystallizes in the middle of the room. Beyonce and Rihanna are, without question, the two most commercially dominant women in music of the entire 21st century. They have both been signed to the same label. They have both been managed by overlapping industry teams. They have both attended the same events. They have both hovered around the same producers, the same songwriters, and the same red carpets for 2 full decades. And they have never, not one single time, released a collaborative song together. Not a feature. Not a remix. Not a charity duet. Not a birthday tribute. Nothing. Two of the biggest voices in music history, orbiting the same man, and the collaboration that should have been the biggest crossover event of the century has never happened. Try to reconcile that if you can. And it gets darker. Cast your mind back to the infamous elevator incident. The night Solange Knowles physically attacked Jay-Z inside a Metropolitan Museum after-party elevator. For years, the mainstream media has treated that night like a family disagreement that got out of hand. But at least one industry source has claimed that the real reason Solange went after Jay-Z that night was because Jay-Z was allegedly attempting to leave the after-party early, alone, without Beyonce, and head straight to Rihanna's private party across town. According to that account, Solange asked Jay-Z why he needed to attend another party without his wife, why he couldn't simply go home, and the answer she got was apparently enough to make her swing on him in a public elevator with her sister standing 3 feet away. If that account is accurate, and I am not saying it is confirmed, but if it is accurate, it means the Rihanna and Jay-Z connection was still active enough years after Ponder replay to trigger a physical assault inside the highest security event of the New York social calendar. And then Jaguar Wright dropped what may be the single most devastating claim in this entire timeline. Jaguar Wright alleged that Rihanna contracted a sexually transmitted illness during her relationship with Jay-Z. Jaguar Wright alleged that Rihanna then passed that same illness to Chris Brown once she and Chris started dating. And Jaguar Wright alleged that Chris Brown allegedly discovered the diagnosis in the worst possible way, on a night when he was already publicly considered a villain by the entire American media apparatus. According to Jaguar's reading of that night, Chris Brown was set up in the public narrative to absorb the fallout for events that had absolutely nothing to do with him, and that the frantic media effort to demonize Chris was actually a coordinated smokescreen designed to prevent the public from asking the one question that actually mattered, which was, what was the source of what Rihanna had contracted? Because the source, in Jaguar's telling, was not Chris Brown. The source, in Jaguar's telling, was Sean Carter himself. Chatter across the industry has now escalated the illness story even further, because now the same allegation has begun circulating against Beyonce herself. Voices online are alleging that Beyonce has been living quietly with a serious diagnosis for years, that the diagnosis originated at one of Diddy's freak-off parties, and that the entire Carter public relations machine has been operating overtime to keep the diagnosis buried. Rihanna's on-camera outburst from that period, in which she screamed about telling the truth about Beyonce's alleged diagnosis, has resurfaced across every corner of the internet this month, and the timing is doing something to public opinion that no amount of Grammy performances can undo. Because what viewers are seeing in that outburst is not a woman inventing a rumor for attention. What viewers are seeing is a woman who has been holding a bomb in her chest for a decade and finally cannot hold it anymore. Sit with the full architecture of what we are looking at. A young Beyonce auditions in front of Diddy at 15. Diddy allegedly praises her voice and her name, but claims the group lacks sex appeal. Diddy allegedly never lets go of the interest. Beyonce enters the Jay-Z orbit years later. Jay-Z ascends to the presidency of Def Jam. Jay-Z brings in a 14-year-old Rihanna at 3 a.m. Rihanna is allegedly coerced into more than a contract. Beyonce allegedly finds out. Rihanna is allegedly past illness. Chris Brown allegedly absorbs the fallout. Solange allegedly attacks Jay-Z inside the elevator. DaBaby walks into Diddy's cleared mansion and finds Jay and Bey inside. Ariel Mitchell views stills of a tape she cannot legally name. Jaguar Wright screams into every microphone within reach that Shannon Sharpe muzzled the truth. And now, Rihanna, the one victim in this entire story who has already become bigger than every man who ever tried to control her, is stepping to the front of the stage with the receipts. And the internet is done. The internet has watched Diddy's empire collapse into federal indictments. The internet has watched celebrity after celebrity refuse to comment. The internet has watched every mainstream outlet dance around the two names that keep appearing in every single deposition, every whistleblower interview, every insider testimony, every legal filing. And the internet has finally decided that the silence itself is the evidence. As one viewer put it in a comment that lit up every algorithmic panel this week, the way legal problems evaporate around Jay-Z and Beyonce every single time their names get whispered next to Diddy's is not a coincidence anymore. It is a pattern, and patterns are what break dynasties. Another viewer said it more plainly. King and Queen of Evil. That single phrase is now being written under every Jay and Bey post on every platform in the world. Beyonce's team has not responded. Jay-Z's team has not responded. Diddy is in federal custody. Rihanna is off the grid. And the tape, according to Ariel Mitchell, is still being shopped somewhere in the shadows to the single highest bidder willing to bury it forever. Everyone who has ever worked with Diddy is terrified. Everyone who has ever attended a freak-off party is watching their phone with a knot in their stomach. And every single black woman who has ever bought a Beyonce album is having a very quiet, very uncomfortable conversation with themselves about whether the empire they've been defending for 20 years was built on a foundation that no honest person could possibly defend. So drop where you land on this in the comments, because I need to hear it from you directly. Do you believe Rihanna is finally telling the full truth about Beyonce and Diddy? Do you believe Jay-Z brokered his own wife into the freak-off circle as part of his business empire with Sean Combs? Do you believe Chris Brown was set up in the public narrative to protect Jay-Z? And most importantly, do you believe the tape Ariel Mitchell claims to have seen is going to leak before the year is out? Sound off in the comments right now, because this story is not slowing down. This story is accelerating, and every single week another piece of it lands on the timeline. And when the next piece drops, you already know where to be. Slide over to the next breakdown queued right below this one, because there is another chapter of this same story that I am about to walk you through. And once you connect what you just heard to what I'm about to show you next, the entire Carter empire is going to look very, very different from the empire you thought you knew. Stay locked in, because we are only just getting started.